diving deep into the story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman today.
Really going beyond the Sunday school version here.
Yeah, we're looking at the historical context and what this encounter reveals about spreading the gospel.
Right, and you've got some fascinating sources for us.
We've got excerpts from a Bible study guide on John A.D., a modern-day story.
About how this same story led someone to faith today.
It's going to be really interesting to see those connections.
Definitely. I think what's really captivating about this encounter is that it unfolds against this backdrop of tension.
Oh, yeah, big tension.
Deep-seated tension between Jews and Samaritans.
Right, so to understand the weight of Jesus' actions, we need to get that historical baggage.
Yeah, we need to appreciate that.
I'm trying to imagine,
Decide
where even accepting a cup of water from someone of a different faith was scandalous.
Yeah. That's crazy. So paint that picture for us.
What led to this divide?
Yeah, how did it get so bad?
Well, it goes back centuries.
Okay.
To the Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom of Israel.
Right. So when the Assyrians dispersed the Israelites and brought in people from other nations, this mixed population became known as the Samaritans.
Right.
And they developed their own distinct form of Judaism.
So that created some friction.
Yeah, friction with the Jews who later returned from exile in Babylon.
Oh, so it wasn't just about, different interpretations of the scriptures.
No, it was much deeper than that.
There were real historical wounds and power struggles going on.
Absolutely, there were real historical wounds.
Wow.
For example, when the Jews returned from exile and began rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem, the Samaritans actively tried to sabotage their efforts.
Oh, wow.
And later, the Jews retaliated by destroying the Samaritan temple on Mount Gerizim.
So by the time of Jesus, these historical grievances had festered into just deep animosity. So Jesus entering Samaria wasn't just geographically significant.
It was a deliberate act.
Yeah.
An act of defiance against social norms.
Wow. Okay, so most Jews at that time.
Most Jews would go out of their way to avoid Samaria.
Right.
But John specifically tells us that Jesus chose to travel directly through it.
He wasn't just passing through.
No, he was on a mission.
Okay, so to push those boundaries even further.
He further pushes it.
He initiates this conversation with a Samaritan woman. It feels like he's walking straight into the eye of the storm.
Right into the eye of the storm.
What do you make of that choice?
It's a powerful statement about who Jesus is and what he values.
Okay.
He wasn't afraid to cross cultural and religious lines.
Yeah.
To reach out to someone who was considered an outsider, really.
Really an outsider.
Marginalized by her own community.
Okay, so let's dive into the encounter itself. The setting is Jacob's Well.
Jacob's Well.
And I have to admit, my knowledge of biblical geography is a bit rusty.
Oh, that's all right.
Can you refresh my memory about the significance of this location?
Jacob's Well is steeped in biblical history, located near the ancient city of Shechem, a place mentioned throughout the Old Testament. So it adds this layer of historical weight to the encounter.
To this already charged encounter.
Yes, and keep in mind, the woman isn't just passing by.
Okay.
She came from a nearby town called Sychar.
Okay.
So suggesting she might have gone out of her way to draw water from this specific well.
Oh, interesting.
Perhaps to avoid judgment from other women in her town.
Interesting. So maybe she's already kind of an outsider in a sense?
In a sense, yes.
So we're talking about unusual choices.
Unusual choices.
The Bible study guide highlights this contrast with Nicodemus. Who comes to Jesus at night.
Under the cover of night.
Right. But here we have a Samaritan woman seemingly avoiding others in broad daylight.
Two extremes.
It is two extremes.
Of social standing and cultural expectations.
Right.
Yet both are drawn to Jesus.
Drawn to Jesus.
In their own unique way.
Yeah. And he meets them where they are.
He does.
He doesn't let their societal anxiety
dictate the
conversation. Yeah, that's good.
So instead of politely asking for water and moving on,
right.
Jesus uses this simple request as an opening to talk about living water.
Yeah. He could have just stuck to small talk.
He could have.
But he clearly has something much deeper in mind.
Much deeper.
What was he aiming at?
I think he was tapping into this rich Old Testament imagery of God as the source of living water.
Oh, okay.
So think of passages from Jeremiah and Zechariah.
Okay.
Where water symbolizes spiritual life. cleansing, and abundance.
Right.
A stark contrast to the physical water she's seeking.
And yet initially she takes his words quite literally.
She does. Completely misses the metaphor.
Yeah.
Her response is completely practical.
Yeah.
Tell me where to get this never-ending water so I can stop hauling it from this well.
All right.
It reveals a lot about her day-to-day struggles
Yeah.
and her desire for something more.
Okay, so it sounds like she might be carrying some burdens.
Maybe.
Maybe even facing ostracism within her community.
It's possible.
And Jesus, being the ultimate discerner of hearts,
He sees right through her.
sees right through her attempt to deflect the conversation.
Yes.
He doesn't let her off easy.
He doesn't.
What's going on with that sudden request for her to call her husband?
It's a fascinating turn.
It is.
Instead of answering directly, Jesus pierces through the pleasantries and forces her to confront her own reality.
Okay.
This seemingly random request exposes her vulnerability and opens the door for a much deeper spiritual conversation.
Oof, talk about getting personal.
It makes you wonder what was going through her mind at that moment.
I know. Was she embarrassed?
Defensive.
Furious.
It's impossible to know for sure.
Yeah.
But what we see is that she doesn't back down.
Oh.
Instead of evading the question, she admits that she doesn't have a husband.
Mm.
And that's where the real conversation begins.
Yeah, it's a pivotal moment.
It really is.
By acknowledging her truth.
Even though it's a painful one.
She opens herself up to genuine dialogue.
Right, and Jesus, with perfect compassion,
doesn't condemn her.
He acknowledges her honesty.
And then reveals he knows even more about her situation.
Yeah.
Oh, it must have felt like he was peering into her soul.
I know.
No wonder the Bible study guide suggests that this encounter echoes themes from John chapter 3.
Right.
This idea of being born again.
Yes, it's not just about acknowledging our past mistakes.
Right.
But about a complete transformation.
Of heart and spirit.
Exactly.
If we zoom out to the bigger picture, this story is essentially a case study.
It is.
In Jesus' approach to sharing his message.
It really is fascinating.
He doesn't shy away from sensitive topics.
No, he doesn't.
But he handles them with incredible grace.
Incredible grace.
He invites honesty.
He does.
And then offers a solution.
Yes.
And that solution is beautifully captured in the book of Ezekiel.
Where God promises to give his people a new heart and a new spirit.
Right. It's not about staying stuck in our brokenness.
It's about being cleansed and restored and empowered to live a new life. It reminds us that true change goes beyond just agreeing with ideas.
Yeah.
It involves a deep internal shift.
Right.
And a willingness to confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather keep hidden.
Here's where it gets really intriguing.
Okay.
In this seemingly ordinary encounter, Jesus reveals his identity as the Messiah.
To this woman. Before he does to many of his own followers.
Seems almost
out of order.
Yeah, out of order. Why her?
That's a question that has puzzled scholars for centuries.
Why then?
But if we look closely at how the revelation unfolds,
okay,
we see that Jesus doesn't just drop this bombshell out of nowhere.
Right.
He patiently builds on their conversation.
Okay.
And he uses her attempts to deflect as stepping stones to deeper truth.
You're talking about when she tries to shift the conversation to the age-old debate about where Jews and Samaritans should worship.
Exactly.
It's as if she's saying,
let's talk theology, anything but my personal life.
Right, exactly.
She's trying to steer clear of the personal and dive into this comfortable theological argument.
Right, comfortable.
But Jesus doesn't take the bait.
He doesn't.
He uses her question to reveal something much more profound about the nature of true worship.
He states that it's not about location,
but about worshiping in spirit and truth.
Which honestly feels incredibly relevant even today.
It does.
When we can get so caught up in rituals and traditions that we miss the heart of faith.
It's a timeless truth that transcends cultural and religious boundaries.
And it's only after establishing this foundation that Jesus reveals his true identity to her.
It's almost as if he's saying, once you understand the essence of true worship, then you're ready to grasp who I truly am.
Okay. And he does so in such a simple,
matter-of-fact way.
Yes. The Bible study guide points out that this is the only instance in the Gospels
before his trial
where Jesus explicitly states that he is the Messiah.
Yes, and he chooses to do it in this intimate,
private moment.
It's profound. This encounter speaks volumes about Jesus' character and his mission.
Yeah.
He doesn't wait for the perfect platform or audience.
Right.
He offers truth freely to anyone who is willing to listen.
Regardless of their social standing or past mistakes.
It completely flips the script on the prevailing social and religious hierarchies of the time.
Right. He's demonstrating that God's grace isn't earned through status or moral perfection.
Absolutely. This encounter lays the groundwork for the explosive spread of the gospel we see later in the story.
Yeah.
It's a radical message of inclusion and hope.
Okay, so let's talk about the ripple effects.
Okay.
This woman doesn't keep the revelation to herself.
No, she doesn't.
She runs back to her town and starts proclaiming, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did."
It's so raw.
It's so raw.
So genuine.
It's not a polished sermon.
No.
It's her lived experience.
Exactly.
It's a striking contrast to the disciples,
who are more concerned with lunch than engaging with Samaritans.
They're shocked that Jesus is even talking to a woman,
let alone revealing such deep truths to her.
Yeah, they're still operating within those limited social boundaries.
They are.
Aren't they?
Precisely. And Jesus uses this as a teaching moment.
Okay.
Pointing out that the harvest is ready.
Even in unexpected places.
He's saying, don't miss out on opportunities because you're too focused on your own assumptions.
He's essentially saying, the fields are ripe, even in Samaria.
It's a call to action for all of us.
But it is.
A reminder that we all have a part to play in sharing our faith.
And the impact of the woman's testimony is incredible.
Incredible.
She doesn't use fancy theological arguments.
No, she doesn't.
She simply tells her story.
And because of her authenticity, many of the Samaritans start believing in Jesus.
Even before they've met him.
It speaks to the power of personal testimony.
It really does.
People are often more moved by genuine stories of transformation than abstract ideas.
Absolutely. They want to see faith lived out.
They do, and then when the Samaritans actually encounter Jesus, their faith is solidified.
The Bible Study Guide emphasizes their powerful statement.
Now we believe, not because of what you said, for we ourselves have heard him, and we know that this is indeed the Christ, the Savior of the world.
Wow.
Her story planted a seed.
But it's Jesus' own words and presence that bring about true conversion.
It's this beautiful partnership between human testimony and divine revelation.
It really is. This encounter leads to a chain reaction.
It does.
Jesus reaches out to one woman.
Her life is changed.
She shares her story.
An entire community encounters Jesus.
It's this incredible domino effect of faith.
It's a model for sharing faith that transcends time and culture.
Okay.
It starts with genuine connection, being open to the unexpected, and stepping out of our comfort zones to share truth.
Speaking of stepping out of comfort zones.
The story of Rob Sketke,
Yes,
a retired Navy officer,
mirrors this encounter in some fascinating ways.
Yes. His story illustrates how this ancient encounter still resonates today.
Okay.
Like the woman at the well, he encountered truth in a surprising way.
He did.
He was struggling with his faith.
Particularly the idea of the Sabbath.
He had even stopped going to church because he was so frustrated by people who seemed to disregard it.
So he's searching for answers.
But he's not sure where to turn.
Right.
And then, completely out of the blue, he receives an unsolicited copy of The Great Controversy in the mail.
Wow.
It's intriguing how he initially approached it as a history book.
Not realizing it was written by one of the founders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
He was drawn in by the logical explanation of how the Sabbath had been changed throughout history.
He even told a friend about this great history book.
And his friend warned him that it was from a cult.
It highlights how quickly we can form judgments.
Based on preconceived notions and stereotypes?
Yeah, even when we're genuinely seeking truth.
But thankfully, Rob was so captivated by what he read that he decided to investigate further.
He sought out a Seventh-day Adventist church in his area to learn more.
Talk about a full circle moment. It's a testament to the power of truth to break through prejudice and preconceptions.
Just like the Samaritan woman.
Rob was initially focused on the physical gulf on Sunday versus water from the well.
Right.
But their encounters with truth,
whether through Jesus directly or through the message in the Great Controversy,
led to profound transformation.
And in both cases, that transformation led them to actively share their newfound faith with others. It's a beautiful reminder that God can work through unexpected avenues.
He can.
And that we shouldn't underestimate the impact of sharing our own stories.
Even if they seem ordinary to us, what fascinates me is how these two stories,
separated by centuries,
both demonstrate the power of the gospel to change lives.
The context may differ,
but the core principles remain constant.
God seeks us out,
offers us living water,
and invites us to become agents of change in our own communities. It's a powerful reminder that God is constantly at work,
often in ways we least expect.
To connect with people.
What resonates with you from these stories? What stands out as particularly meaningful? For me, it's the emphasis on being open to the unexpected.
Okay.
We often have these preconceived notions about who is reachable or who would be interested in faith.
Right.
But these stories remind us that God's grace is available to everyone.
Yeah.
And that sometimes the most unlikely people become powerful witnesses.
Yeah, it's a good challenge for all of us.
It is.
To check our assumptions and really see the people around us as God sees them.
Yeah.
To recognize that potential for transformation.
In anyone.
No matter their background.
Precisely. And these stories also make me think about the importance of sharing our own experiences.
Yeah.
However imperfect they might seem.
Right.
It's easy to downplay our own spiritual journeys.
Thinking, well, my story isn't that dramatic or inspiring.
Right. But we never know how God might use our vulnerability.
To touch someone else's heart.
Exactly.
The Samaritan woman didn't have a theological treatise prepared.
She just shared what had happened to her.
And it sparked a whole movement.
It's incredible.
It makes me wonder.
What wells might we be encountering in our own lives?
Yeah, what seemingly ordinary interactions
might hold the potential for extraordinary spiritual connection?
That's such a powerful question.
We often rush through our days,
focused on our to-do lists,
and miss those subtle invitations to deeper conversation.
The woman at the well was just going about her daily routine.
Fetching water.
Who would have thought that such a mundane task would become the setting?
For such a profound encounter.
And that's what's so encouraging.
These opportunities are all around us.
It might be a conversation with a coworker.
A chance encounter with a stranger.
Even a comment thread online.
But we have to be paying attention.
Listening for those whispers of the divine in the everyday.
Exactly, and it's not just about recognizing the opportunity. It's about having the courage to engage.
Jesus could have easily kept walking.
But he chose to stop and initiate a conversation with a woman who...
by all societal standards.
She should have avoided.
Yeah. It makes me wonder, who are we avoiding?
Who are we writing off as unreachable?
Because they don't fit our preconceived notions.
That's a good question.
Yeah. It challenges me to expand my circle of compassion.
To see those around us.
Not just for their differences,
but for their shared humanity.
Their longing for connection.
Their potential to experience God's love.
Yes. And it's important to remember that sharing our faith
isn't about having all the answers.
Or presenting a perfectly polished image.
Rob Sketke was initially drawn to the great controversy for its historical insights.
Right.
Not because he was seeking a spiritual awakening.
Okay.
It was the logic and reasoning that initially captivated him.
And that opened the door to something much deeper.
It reminds us that intellectual curiosity can be a pathway to faith.
God gave us minds.
And he wants us to use them to explore his truth.
Sometimes the most unexpected questions.
The ones that come from a place of genuine seeking.
Can lead to the most profound discoveries.
It's about meeting people where they are.
Respecting their questions.
And trusting that the Holy Spirit can work through honest dialogue.
Even if it starts with historical debates or personal doubts.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive.
What key takeaways do you hope our listener will carry with them?
Yeah. What will they be mulling over long after this conversation ends?
First, I hope they'll be encouraged to embrace the unexpected.
Okay.
God is constantly at work orchestrating divine appointments in the most surprising ways.
We need to be open to those nudges.
Those seemingly random encounters that might hold profound spiritual significance.
Second, I hope they'll be challenged to examine their own assumptions.
About who is worthy of God's love and who can be a vessel for sharing that love.
We need to break down the walls of prejudice and judgment.
And see each person as an image bearer of the divine, full of potential for transformation.
And finally, I hope they'll be inspired to share their own stories.
Don't underestimate the power of your personal journey.
Your experiences, your struggles, your moments of grace
can resonate with someone in ways you never imagined.
Beautifully said.
The story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman is a timeless reminder that God is always seeking to connect with us.
To quench our thirst for meaning and purpose.
And he invites us to join him in that mission.
To become conduits of his love and grace to a world that desperately needs it.
So let's step out of our comfort zones.
Engage in those seemingly ordinary conversations.
And trust that God will work through us.
Even in the most unexpected ways to bring hope and healing to those around us.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep seeking.
Keep exploring.
And keep sharing the living water.